Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Shroyer, a career positioning strategist, professor, and someone who spent a lot of time thinking about what it really means to grow in a world that just won't stop changing. Welcome to the Technically Human podcast. This podcast is about navigating your career, your identity, and your next chapter in a world that's shaped by AI, technology, and constant change. Here, we're going to talk about real stuff. We're going to talk about career pivots, uncertainty, reinvention, and mostly how to stay grounded in who you are while everything around you evolves. Are you ready to go? Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Technically Human podcast. I am joined in this episode with guest Wes Towers. So, Wes, welcome. Thank you for joining
Oh,
me.
yeah, pleasure to be here, Tracy. Good to be speaking with you.
Thank you. Wes, before we dive in, I put together some questions. I do a little bit of research, but I get a lot more curious on
Yeah,
the
cool.
calls with questions.
Yeah,
Would you
nice.
just, yeah, give us some background just about yourself and what you do and what led you to that path?
Yeah, I run a digital agency here in Australia, Uplift 360. So we do websites and search engine optimization and all of that fun stuff. I've been doing it a long time now, just over 20 years. I've been running my own business. Started naively, started with a skill set. I'd worked in marketing companies for only a few short years before starting my own business and had to learn the hard way in a lot of ways. I knew how to do websites and so on, but I didn't know how to run a business. And somehow fumbled and stumbled my way through those first few years and made enough income and built it up to what it is today. So it's, yeah, exciting and terrifying times we're living in right now with AI and our world for sure.
Absolutely. One thing I want to have you touch on is who your typical client is, because your typical client
Yeah.
is not somebody who's technically knowledgeable about what you do and how to do it. Can you
Yeah.
share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're really niched into the trades and construction industry, a lot of industrial kind of businesses that we work with. So as you say, they're more hands-on, pragmatic, on the tools type people. They're often founder-led businesses. So just like me, they started out with their skill set, they learned a trade, they got busy doing that craft and started a business and built a business. So they're not really, for the most part, they're not computer people by any means. So they're not really up to speed as much. Some are, of course, there's outliers, but for the most part, they don't really sit behind a computer all day and they're not really thinking about marketing so much. So that's where there's obviously a great need and opportunity to support these people in their fields.
And so you've been doing this for a little over 20 years.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit about how things looked when you started versus I can't even
yeah,
imagine the evolution to now and what we have available today. Can you
yeah.
share some of the big maybe milestones along the way of how your business has changed because of
Yeah,
that?
it's been wild to even to think back when I was an employee. So my first job I landed in Sydney was a marketing award-winning marketing company, and they'd never designed a website. So when we think about marketing these days, we think about online and so on. Back then, it wasn't really that every business had a website. We didn't even have one as the marketing agency. We only had one computer connected to email or internet at all. So it's crazy to think about. I feel so old saying all of that. But they won a job to do a website and they said, "You're the young guys fresh out of university. You better figure out how to build this site because we've already won the project." And so I did it, and I love the technical and the creative blend. It was how I was wired. So I became their web person. And by the time I started my own business, it's really what I wanted to do. But yeah, from there, it's always felt like an industry that changes super fast. And I've always said if I stopped today and came back in a year's time, everything would have moved so fast. It'd be hard to pick it up again. But the last few years with AI, it's been just accelerated even further. It just feels as though everything's changing from day to day, the opportunities. And sometimes when there's so many great opportunities popping up, people don't make a decision to move forward just because there's an abundance of opportunity. It's very difficult to make a decision.
That analysis paralysis, right? Looking at all the different
Yeah,
options you have. So with the
yeah,
speed of change, and especially thinking about AI in the last few years, how do you keep up? Like you have to be
yeah,
several steps ahead of your clients to figure
yeah.
out what's going on. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate in that I've got lots of technical people around me as well. I don't think any one person has all the answers right now. And so I'm really fortunate in having a good team of developers and technically minded people. So they love this sort of stuff and they're digging into things just for fun. They're watching YouTube about different scenarios and just figuring it out. But it always feels like I'm not quite the expert yet, but I don't think anyone is. We've certainly improved and enhanced the business using AI technology and adapted our workflows, our standard operating procedures, those sorts of things. And it just feels as though the technical piece, that those skill sets are becoming not redundant, but less and less more useful. But the human connection and the being able to help people make decisions, because as we said before, there's so many options. It's so hard to know which path to take when there's just so many, an abundance of really good opportunities. So you need some sort of guidance along the path from experts who have done it before. I think that's where the true value is these days, that thought leadership and guidance and that human connection to understand a person and a business and to know what they need to take them forward wherever they perceive their vision to be.
What are some ways that you work with your clients to grasp that understanding versus like a lot of people say, give me a form and they might feed it into an AI tool or something like that. But how do you build that human connection with them in order to portray that to their clients and what you build for them?
Yeah. So yeah, that it's the best thing you can do with AI is to have conversations. So the biggest mindset shift as people who work behind computers, I believe, is to start thinking about speaking to your devices as opposed to typing. So we're also attached to our keyboards, which is great and it's fine. But because these are large language models, they understand the context and they understand lots of content. And the easiest way to get a lot of that information is discussions. So this is the really cool part in terms of working with clients. What we'll do is have Zoom calls and meetings, and obviously that's recorded and you can get the transcript and dump it into whatever AI platform you want with the right prompts. You're so much further advanced along the journey of establishing what their core messaging is from a marketing standpoint and what their goals are, what they might need to consider in their marketing strategies and their website, and even getting their voice and tone down pat. So it's become far easier to have just a natural conversation and to guide and to draw out some of those key elements from a founder. This is the really cool part for the people we serve. They haven't got to get bogged down with all the AI tech and everything we're using behind the scenes. We've just got to have that open and honest conversation. One of the key strategies of drawing that information out of a person is to have it almost like a venting session so they can just dump everything that they are frustrated about their industry and even on their competitors. Now, these would never be public conversations, but it's a massive venting session. And once you see what really frustrates them and what they think the competitors are doing wrong, but just when you come at it from the inverse and the opposite perspective and the positive, it's almost revealing the shadow so that you can see where the light is. And so you come at it from the opposite positive angle and it highlights what their values are and what their core message should likely be. And they find it far easier to vent about their frustrations and the negative side. And it might be partially the nature of the market we serve. Maybe that's part of it. But I think it's the human nature that we know emotionally our frustrations and can express them far more easily than the positive, unfortunately. But AI is great at flipping that around and finding it in the positive way.
That's interesting what you said. So you talked about speaking to your devices versus typing into them. I just
Yeah,
listened to a podcast episode a couple days ago, actually two different episodes from two different shows, where they were
yeah,
talking about speaking into their devices versus typing and how much
yeah,
more it gives, like you said, the emotion and different things like that. So
yeah,
this morning I have a 50-minute drive to work. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to hit record and I'm going to start talking about my career coaching business and frustrations I have, who's my ideal client, some things to kind of help my marketing, improve my marketing.
yeah,
And then I took that and I put it into an AI tool. And what it came back with, I felt like it was way better than if I would have done any kind of prompting. I had some prompts with it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just that voice, and that was like 8 minutes of me talking, which you're going to get so
yeah,
much more out of that versus just a couple of lines of prompts.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And it'll,
I
it'll
love
start
that.
to learn and see patterns in what you're saying. and a great one to ask it because a lot of the tools can be quite positive and affirming whatever you're saying, but to really demand of it almost that it gives you the opposite and the risks of whatever you're saying. So if you've got a strategy and you request it to help you in building that strategy, just to ask what are the weaknesses in this as well, and what am I missing? Those sorts of questions. And
Yes.
that's really helpful when you're speaking it through because you can have that conversation. It's almost like a psychologist working through some of those things together. It can be really powerful.
Yeah. I'm always like, don't sugarcoat it. Tell me, is this
Yeah,
worth my time? And it knows so much else about me and what I'm doing. And
yeah,
it's think about other chats that we have and look at
yeah.
it that way.
Yeah, I'm always asking it to be brutally honest because it feels as though it's moving away from that all the time. So you've got to remind it, hey, be brutally honest with this thing.
Yes.
So
Or it's very nice about when it's going to tell you something. It's, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings or anything, but you need to think
yeah,
about this too. And I'm like, good, lay it out for me. I want to hear that kind of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that's it's so cool, and I think as you would be fully aware, it's transforming not just businesses, but the way in which employees work and need to think about their roles as well. So that creates terror sometimes, and it creates excitement. It depends on how you're wired, but it's exciting to
Yes.
be in the world you're in for sure. That must be incredibly interesting how people are managing and thinking about these things.
Yes, definitely. Another thing I wrote down as you were talking is
Yeah,
whether to use or not use AI. So I know that some people feel like it's black or white, it's a yes or no. And by day, I'm in higher ed, and there's professors that are like, absolutely not. I'm in the business division. I'm like, yes, people need to learn how to do this to stay alive within the industry, things like that. But when you think about like for your business and your clients, how do you determine whether you use AI tools or you don't? Or are there certain tasks that you use it for versus that you don't?
Yeah, for the most part, wherever it will do a better job than us, it's definitely used. I think the reason why there's pushback sometimes is, particularly from a marketing standpoint, there can be that AI slop, that generic content that we all are growing to dislike. You bump into it across social media and everywhere else online. And there's that lack of trust because there's a lack of authenticity. And so that can send the wrong message. Sometimes when I get emails back, sometimes I'm unsure if even anyone's checked over it. It feels as though one of those AIs has responded. And I wonder, what's going on here? Is this person even read what I've said? So there's that lack of trust. And I think the role of marketing these days in particular is to create authority and trust in the marketplace. And so whether you use AI or not, it needs to be amplifying your core message and your uniqueness. And it has to be different to everybody else. So this is the challenging part. Sometimes we'll rely upon the tool to create content, let's say, and we rely upon that to have the thought leadership, but really we need to be the ones guiding what the core message is. And we need to talk about things that only we can speak about. So there's a uniqueness. So with our clients, we're encouraging them always to talk about and consider publishing regarding projects they've worked on that only they can speak of. And some of our clients have worked on magnificent buildings that are globally recognized buildings, some of the commercial buildings. And so all they need to do is talk about the projects they've worked on and how they, whatever the process was and how the outcomes were achieved and who else was involved, whether it be architects and so on. And all of this information only they can talk about. Now they can use AI to help distill the thoughts down into a meaningful and logical sequence, which
Mhm.
it does a really great job of. But when you just jump on a tool and say, hey, I need content because I'm fresh out of ideas, then that's when it becomes pretty generic.
Yes. And I've seen that. I was playing around a little bit with AI and building out like visual images.
Yeah.
And when I looked at it, I thought, oh, I think this looks pretty cool. And then I go over to LinkedIn and I start looking through my feed and I was like, oh, you can tell where people are using it to create those
Yeah.
images. And then I started to say, I don't want to use this because I feel like it doesn't set me apart. It doesn't build that trust and that authority and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's almost moving to, in my view, almost like an artist where if there's a legitimate painter who's painted a piece of art, there's value in the art because we know the artist, we know their backstory, we know it was their hand and their brush and the paint that touched that canvas. Once we don't feel as though it was the genuine artist, if it was just a replica, a fraud or something, it might be just as beautiful, but the value has been eroded because hasn't got that depth of authenticity. So I think moving forward in marketing, we're always trying to think about authenticity and how do we convey this business and the leader, if they're building upon a personal brand, how do we build upon that so they're authentically a real person with a real human story? And how do we connect that story and translate that into something meaningful for what they do as a company as well? So I think even showing the flaws in who you are can be really helpful because it's that human connection and relatability. You've got to think about how that translates into your circumstances and business. But I think they're the big wins if you can figure out how to bring your humanity into your business. I think that'll help you stand out in this crazy world.
Yes, definitely. Have you had any clients in the last couple years where they know that you're using AI tools and they are worried about that? Or are they generally open?
No, I've not had anyone worried about it at all. I guess the worry is sometimes, do we have to do anything? Do I have to change anything in the way I'm doing stuff? And it's actually not at all. We have that Zoom call, and what happens with the transcript and behind the scenes, we've got great prompts and to translate everything into what we need to be done, the workflows. So from their perspective, they haven't got to change anything. In fact, it makes it easier. They haven't got to fill in long forms or anything like that. We have got some pretty lengthy forms on the website. What we're finding is they're being used by not the decision maker, but sometimes it might be an admin assistant or something, someone of that nature who's just been instructed to go out and get a few quotes and so on. And so those types of people are just plugging and playing their requests into a lengthy form. That's fine. But for the founders who want to just have a conversation, they're finding it far easier not to fill in lengthy forms and so on. And we can get so much information out of just a quick conversation.
So, in the projects that you've worked on, especially in the
Yeah.
last few years, and using technology, do
Yeah.
you have any stories where a client has been like just, I guess, mind blown around what you were able to do and the time frame you had to do it to move them from where they were to make sure that they're more visible, they have that marketing, they have all those materials that they need, and that they're starting to grow more in
Yeah.
their business?
Certainly with the optimization of websites, there's been some really quick wins, particularly with bigger sites where you've got lots and lots of pages. So I don't want to geek out too much, but with the website, you can have a meta description and title for each and every page. And that's an opportunity if it shows up in Google that it will show that title and description. So it's best to custom write something unique and specific for each and every page. If you've got a product, we've got some building material websites. If you've got hundreds or thousands of products, it takes a long time to read and write all of that information. But these days, there's some great tools that can do it for you, and it does a remarkable job. So it'll go through page by page, reading the information, and then writing a title and description that's specific.
Wow.
You can tell it the style in which you want it to be written, but you can get it done in a few clicks of button where that might have taken days if it's a big enough website. Now it just takes a few clicks and it's done. You can imagine the expense it would have been if you were going through manually over,
Hours, yeah.
yeah. So so yeah, some of those things, just using the right tools for those opportunities, it's been really wonderful. The challenge with that, of course, is everyone's got the ability to use the same tool. So it just raises the stakes, doesn't it? It's like when I mentioned we only had one email account when I started in that marketing company. But back then, people didn't expect immediate responses. So what we would do, someone would go over to the computer connected to email and call out, "Hey, Jimmy, you've got an email to respond to," and he'd respond in a few days' time or what have you. But now you expect email response. People expect email responses within minutes, sometimes or hours. So it's going to just accelerate things, and the expectations are going to evolve, and the speed in which people expect things is going to accelerate. At right now, it's probably lagging. It'll always lag a little bit behind the capability, but I think we've just got to be prepared for these things.
definitely. One thing that I hear a lot as a career coach is, why do I need to hire you when I could just use these AI tools to write my resume for me? And I have a
Yeah.
great answer for that. Thinking for you, marketing materials, website, all of those things that you help your clients create. Why should they hire you versus using these AI tools?
Yeah, it's that expert knowledge, isn't it? When you're working in a certain field, you quickly pick up what works and what doesn't in certain circumstances. And because we're so niched, we really do have a good understanding of what strategies are likely to work. And as you said before, you touched on AI can be positive with any kind of strategy. So that's it makes it difficult to determine which actually is the best process forward. And also, when you're asking, if you're looking at opportunities that involve AI, there potentially is a bias in built into the tool in which you're using. If you're saying, hey, what's the best AI tool to do XYZ, and you're speaking to an AI, is there a bias toward their own set of tools? I don't know. But when you have expert guidance and there's multiple opportunities and options, that's when the real value is brought to the table.
What does good positioning look like, whether it's a website or a person? What would you believe that to be?
Yeah, positioning, it's super important because it's what can set you apart. Everyone can publish equivalently powerful information that's about your industry and business, but your unique position is what sets you apart. And so good positioning will deter people from coming towards you and it will attract the right people into your world. And so that's really the goal. If you're trying to attract everybody, attract nobody, it feels in. Probably that's potentially where career paths go, in my view. You're more of an expert than me, but to think about how do you be the expert authority in the industry in which you work in your career path? How do you bring a higher level of value, a humanized level of value that AI can't do? I was talking to a guy just before this call. I run a podcast as well, and I was interviewing him. He's an architect and he hires all sorts of people. He had some project managers working with him from a more of an engineering background. So they think a certain way, but he wasn't getting the right outcomes. There's always challenges in his world with potential conflicts. And so you need to be able to manage those human conversations and relationships and figure out outcomes that serve everybody. So there's that real need for the human emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
So these engineer background types were not serving him very well, but he ended up having some interior designers in his team as well. And two of these ladies started taking on the roles that previous engineers were that he had. I think he either they moved on or he removed them. I'm not too sure. But these ladies took on the role and they were far superior at the emotional intelligence aspect. And they were coming at it from a different angle. And they were creative people as well, because interior designers have got that aesthetic and the creative, and they're thinking about how you make something beautiful in circumstances where which there are limitations in terms of budget and space and all that kind of stuff. So they're naturally figuring out how to work within confinements and how to work with people and so on. So they were doing a far superior job. I think there's just that mindset shift of figuring out how do you relate and translate what people's needs are and make them meaningful. And because if you handle it wrong, it can create conflict. And I guess the engineering back, people who are engineering that linear and the way in which they think are kind of a certain way, where the interior designers are quite the opposite thinking. So I think it's the time for the rise of creative-minded people and people who can understand people. I think that's the real
Mm.
value in this day and age where AI can do the tech stuff for us, but we can get to relate to people and humanize our brands. I think that's where all of us will really grow in business and careers.
Yes, definitely. So when you have a client come to you and they're doing really well, probably word of mouth in their company, but they're really invisible online. What's the first place that you start them at? Is it a website or is it social media? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, our strategy is mostly the same for all clients, although it can take different shape. So the goal of social media, in my view, is to get people off social media, which sometimes confuses people, but social media is a noisy place. and there's all your competitors there, and there's other distractions and so on. So you really want to create brand awareness because that's where your audiences are. They're spending their time in various platforms, but to draw them back into your website wherever you possibly can, because you control the website. That's all your messaging. You can be clearer, you can be concise, you can be compelling. It's a greater level of connection. But even that's not the primary goal and objective. The goal of the website is to get them off your website. And so, where do we want them? We want them in a human conversation because, for the most part, our clients are not selling a $10 widget that you can buy impulsively. They're selling something of higher perceived value. And so they want to talk to somebody. And so all the AI bots in the world aren't going to do it for you. They want a real person they can relate to, they can understand. They know they've been heard and they can sell that higher dollar value. We work with builders and so on, building custom people's dream homes. They're not going to rely upon an AI bot to make that decision. They want to know who the builder is, who the people are behind the business, and can they trust them to do what they're looking to get done. So it's all, yeah, it's all geared. It surprises some people sometimes when we say that, but it's all geared around, every step of the process is geared around creating a human connection.
I like that. One of the things I've heard about, I haven't looked into a lot of, but we used to hear the term SEO, the search
Yeah,
engine optimization. I've heard a lot more talk about AEO, the answer
yeah.
engine optimization within AI. Is that something that you look at too for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call it search everywhere optimization simply because it's still SEO and we can, that's how we've always spoken. So but it's the same thing. It's an attempt to show up not only in search engines anymore, but also large language models. And the beauty of it is that all the tools, Google or large language models, they understand language. That's what they do, large language. Publishing content, fresh, unique content regularly that addresses specific needs, answers to questions, or solutions to what people might be searching for. That's a really powerful play. It does take time and effort, but you've got to build that authority and reputation. Google like it when you're publishing fairly frequently because it's just a clue to them to suggest it's up to date and relevant and it's not redundant information. So that's helpful in Google's eyes. But all the same principles apply and translate because they're all trying to achieve the same thing. They're all trying to surface the very best information for someone's particular scenario. So they might be questions and answers type scenario, or they might be just looking for data or information. And if you've got that information, then you'll surface at the right time.
Is there anything else that you would like to share just about some of the topics that we talked about that could be helpful?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. Thanks so much, Tracy. I think the one thing that any of us should start thinking about is just if you're a little bit scared or worried about starting in AI, is just to get one of the basic tools. Probably just start with ChatGPT and start creating habits around talking to it rather than typing. And then you'll start to grasp what it can do. The other thing too, there's a lot of people talking about prompts and you can the perfect prompt for different scenarios. The way to get the perfect prompt is to ask the tool itself. So you can have a conversation, say, "Hey, I need prompts around these workflows that I do in my business. Can you help me?" Ask me question by question until you've got everything you need to create the perfect prompt. So it's best to get it to ask you question by question because if you don't tell it that specifically, it'll just start saying question after question and you can't answer them. So one at a time, and it'll go through and you'll just have a conversation and out pops the perfect prompt customized specifically for how you think and what you think is important. You don't need to be scared by it. Just have a conversation with it, just like you would a person.
And that's what I think a lot of people, when they're using an AI tool for the first time, they think it's like a Google search and they just put
Yeah.
something in there. And
Yeah.
like I've even talked to people about interviewing and prepping for a job interview. And I'm like, explain the job, post a job description in ChatGPT and say, this is who you are, here's your experience. Ask me questions and let me respond to you and answer. And
Yeah.
the fact that I'm hearing more and more about speaking versus typing, that'll make it a lot
Yeah.
easier for people to just speak like this is how I would say it and give me
Yeah.
feedback and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been really interesting with because I was speaking to someone else about the recruitment process, and they were just saying how AI creates a short list of all the applicants, and then all the applicants have submitted their resumes through AI. So it's almost like AI talking to AI. So I wonder, and you'll have more ideas around that, but just you've got to find a way to stand out and be unique. And so maybe it doesn't land with some people, but maybe it will. So finding a way to stand out above the noise is going to be the new challenge.
Absolutely. This has been great. I appreciate your time and talking with you on this episode. Wes, if anybody wants to connect with you, how should they do it?
Yeah, uplift360.com.au, Australian website. But if you jump on there, you'll see we serve brands all around the world. So you're probably brands most people would recognize. So yeah, mostly trades and construction businesses who we serve. Happy to have a conversation with anyone interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for your time and for your expertise and your experience. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks again for listening to the Technically Human podcast. If you are navigating a career shift or you're just feeling like something needs to change, remember you do not have to figure it out alone. You can find tools, strategy, and support inside the membership. Learn more at www.careercompossusa.com. And if this episode helped you in any way, sharing it with someone else might help them too. I'll see you in the next episode.